Hey, everybody, just letting you know we'll be starting in just a few minutes. Thank you for joining the Zappletech meeting. We'll be right back with you shortly. Hey, everybody, it's Paul Grossman, the Dark Arts Wizard. I believe we are actually starting a few minutes early, and I want to tell you a little bit about today's events. It is going to be a really great presentation here. We've got two fantastic speakers going on here. We have got Supita, who is going to talk us a little bit about artificial intelligence with automation and how it's going to be impacting and affecting uh, our future as test automation engineers and developers. I suspect she's going to be talking little bit with a little bit about Chat GPT. If you haven't heard about Chat GPT, it is a super cool thing that is going on there. And then we're going to have, and and I'm actually seeing we are actually live. Just heard a little live stuff in my ears. So, second thing is we also have Marcus Merrell. Now, Marcus Merrell is one of my oldest contacts with test automation, and when he comes up, I'm going to show you a little bit of a history of what Marcus and I have in common. In fact, I found an old one of the first conferences that Marcus spoke at, where I happened to get a chance to meet up with him. One other thing to let you know is that there is a chat that is going on. If you're watching us live on the LinkedIn field over there, there's a chat. Um, I do always tell everybody there's only one dumb question, and that is the one you didn't ask. So please, for either one of our guests, put chats in the questions in the chat up there, and we will basically try to answer them at the end. Hopefully we go about 40-45 minutes, depending on how much Polly talks. And we will try to answer your questions live as we go. And then afterwards, we'll try to respond to you from I think by email or some other fashion over there. Let's see. We're still about 2 minutes from our actual start time. Um, I just do want to once again thank Zappletech for hosting these events. You guys are great. In case you're brand new here, I've been a host over here for about the last 6 months. And prior to that, there was Larry Goddard, who was also the host. If you miss Larry, we're going to bring him back either January and February. And we do have a couple of my friends coming up in January to do some more speaking on test automation out there. Let's see. I think I've covered everything. Thank you, Zappletech. Send your questions. Don't be shy. It's all cool. And with that, I have got online over here Supita. No, wait, hang on. Sudipta, I'm going to get your name right. I so apologize. But welcome to the Zappletech Meetup. Thank you so much for taking some time with us.
Sure. Thank you so much, Paul, for introducing me and giving me the opportunity to speak in this virtual summit. This is basically, I am coming from Cisco Digital Assurance and Automation team, where I am working on the test automation on a decade over there. Um, so I just wanted to have a quick introduction myself and what we are going to talk about. Let's see how this can be taken care of. So let me first bring up my slide, and hopefully my slides are visible over here. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever the geographical region you are joining over here. Today, I am Sudipta Debnath, technical leader of digital assurance and automation from Cisco Systems Customer Experience Group. I'm going to take you through a journey of artificial intelligence in test automation. When we talk about the artificial intelligence, is a vast thing to understand. Today's session, I will quickly walk you through how artificial intelligence can be a game changer in automation testing and how Cisco is visualizing at this point of time to accelerate our internal test automation story. So let's start our overview. So what are we going to cover up today? What is the biggest challenge in test automation? Understand the artificial intelligence, how AI is going to define the testing industry to move from practice to performance. It's Paul has mentioned the chat GPT. I will not get into any proprietary information or any specific information, but I'm going to give an idea how the open AI is going to change the automate the test automation. When we talk about automate the test automation, is that a myth or is it really doable? How you will design the automation model and how we see as a Cisco as an organization envision business impact and key takeaways from this session. So let's start. So 2 years ago, 2021, when the whole industry was going to a revolutionary change in all aspect and world was going through a revolutionary change, that time we perform a survey. So we basically conduct a poll across various customers, internal users who are very frequently use the test automation frameworks and potential stakeholders to ask them that what is your biggest challenge in test automation. So people gave us different feedback. For few people, learning curve, whatever the test automation does or any industry standard tool does, learning curve is a big aspect. Few says that inputting data set, how should scope my test automation. I do not know that. I'm not very confident how I scope it off. Few says that the test coverage, how I should bring the efficiency. Okay, I'm doing the test automation already, but how I can make it more efficient. So out of that poll result, we just analyze it and we find it out. Determining the scope of test automation is a 85% to 90% challenging situation for most of the testing industry. Then second comes, if you can follow the graph in the right hand side of the presentation, making the test automation reusable. What do I mean by that? How repetitively I can use my test automation, that's a challenge. Automation of test script generation, automation of test workflow generation, there is a challenge, but that is not so prominent, because when we talk about test automation, mostly we think about how to automate the test execution process. So our conclusion is that at present, there are no test automation solution which can automatically predict or define the scope for a tester or a test engineer what to test, how to test. And there is nothing as such exist in the industry that with the zero human intervention, how tester can automatically design a test suite, execute it, and publish a result. So definitely we do have certain solutions and certain industry standards, and market is test automation market is basically built up with how faster we can automate the test suite, how faster we can execute it. But zero human intervention, this is still a myth. So if you see overall the market of the test automation, the challenges are as follows: determine the scope of test automation automatically, how we should decide a right set of test automation to test a product, how we should make it reusable, how we should make it repeatable, automate the test script generation. For every test automation framework, there is some manual work involved, and that is where we call or we differentiate test automation engineer from the manual test automation, from the manual test engineer as well, right? So how good it could be if you can have a framework which can automatically identify the testing scope, right set of test cases to be pushed into for a product to test, test script should be generated automatically, and decide the test workflow automatically. So our intention is multiple direction, right? We basically would like to left shift the whole test automation process from execution to the scoping. And over there, we would like to find out the how we should automate the test automation process. In today's discussion, let us see how artificial intelligence can target to solve these challenges. So, before we start, how artificial intelligence would be impacting this whole test automation industry, let us understand a quick overview about what is artificial intelligence. So, as the quotation goes by, statistics shows only one third of the industry can actually achieve the return on investment on today's business on test automation. While cloud occupies a heavy part of our test automation industry and targets to set up with next level computing power, access to the new kinds of data sets, but what we believe that artificial intelligence can build up a bridge to convert that data into a business value. So artificial intelligence is basically a process that is going to simulate human intelligence processed by machine, and especially to the computer system. That's the biblical language or the biblical definition of artificial intelligence. When we come towards the machine learning, it requires a deep learning, supervision, unsupervised situations, and many aspects has to be covered up. So if we see in a very broad aspect of the artificial intelligence, it can be categorized into some 6 to 7 categories. Machine learning plays a very key role for that, which heavily impacts the test automation industries. Natural language processing, as Paul mentioned, the chat GPT, like you speak, we decode what is your requirement and convert it into the test automation requirement, right? And mostly vision and speech recognition. Speech recognition is, of course, the part of any OpenAI system, but vision, like image recognition, when you suppose when you are automating a UI testing, how you are recognizing your UI images, that is also can be fit through the artificial intelligence. And of course, robotics, where we talk about you can automate the process, test execution process, you can automate the physical interface and device testing through the robotics, right? Now, let's see that different types of artificial intelligence, how it interacts with our test automation industry. So, artificial intelligence is not a very new concept. In 2016, in a journal, Aaron Hinz, who is the professor of integrative biology and computer science in the Michigan State University, he explained that AI can be categorized into 4 types: reactive, limited memory, theory of mind, and self-aware. So when we talk about in the test automation to be driven by the artificial intelligence, we basically would like to consume all these 4 pillars in a religious way, where we can understand what we would like to do by the test automation framework. And you as a human, or you as a consumer of the test automation framework, how intelligent you would like to build it up. So, AI defines basically the testing industry to move from practice to performance. In any organization, whenever we go for test automation, right, we always define that what is the scope of test automation. Test automation basically targets to execute the test cases or execute the test scenarios which is repetitive in nature, right? So, for any kind of regression testing, it could be software regression testing, it could be the system integration regression testing, test automation is must to have need for any organization. But is that the only thing you need for the test automation? Answer could be no, or answer could be I would like to make it more efficient. So when we talk about the efficiency, AI can target further into the left side of the test automation process. Before the test automation execution being started, you need to understand how to generate the test cases. So AI targets to solve that problem, automatically generate test using an algorithm, automation code for various test ecosystems and test data. Then next comes into test optimization. So any organization should be having a huge legacy test assets, because we are very old into this market, right? So how we can convert them to a minimal set of test cases so that we can define a very strict scope which would be the business critical automatically. The last but not least point, the test execution, we cannot underestimate that part as well, right? So when we talk about test execution, do you really need every time an automation engineer to investigate the test report? Do you want them to analyze it manually every time? Or whenever you are changing a piece of code, Would you like to analyze that what all test cases has to be run against it? How good it could be if an AI driven model can exactly find out what all test cases has to be executed against that piece of code, and continuously keep on comparing the test results with the history that you have already executed in past, and dynamically detect changes and regression. So AI model can target to do the test analysis and test execution automatically. Suppose today you are executing a test suite where the three test cases, or say four test cases, have been failed, which were passing in your previous run. So model can identify whether it is a defect coming into your piece of code, or whether you have changed a piece of code. For that, your test script has to be changed and re-executed. So AI can target all this practice to the performance. Now let's see how automation, the test automation, that is what I call it, is that a myth? In traditional approach, if you can follow the right side of the presentation, there is a workflow I have just put over there. In traditional test automation approach, we basically use to analyze, identify automation goals. If the framework exists, then define the scope of test. If the test bed exists, identify that how we should implement the executions and implement it, and review the test cases and go for the maintenance. In case you do not have the framework over there, then design and implementation is another challenge. So reality check of the test automation, most of the test automation, our scope is very limited to the automation of test execution process. In most cases today, industry is moving very faster, and we get into a term called the agile testing, right? While we consider that CI/CD or DevOps is a crucial part of the software development lifecycle, it is also important to consider only automating the test execution is no more a cost beneficial for any organization, right? We need to think more. And test automation also need to consider how the scope and all those things has to be identified. So a predictive data model is needed to identify the input data set, consider the automate the test automation process. Now, let us think in little different way. If we have a framework that will automate defining the scope of test, or help us to identify the automation goals automatically, or generates the combination of all input test data, it is going to reduce our work. It is going to reduce our scope of work. I am not saying that the human intervention will get off at the very first level, but it is a continuous process how you can make the data model more matured, and build up a mature data model where all these things which is being done today manually, that can be reduced. So there are four pillars we can consider when we come into the AI driven model, right? Automate the test model construction, automate the test case identification, automate the test data creation, and optimize the automated test script generation. So this is what these four pillars build the automate the test automation. Now, how we should design a test automation model? So as a first step, um, I would just like to highlight the very first step to design a test automation model is that building up a reusable test libraries and define the scope of testing. We call it as test accelerator packages. So you can see here, Cisco as an organization, they are in process of building the test accelerator packages or reusable test libraries depending on various architecture, platform, and product which we deliver to the customer. So first thing first, we have categorized our business on all these colored pillars, and deliverables have been identified or bucketized in each of this category. And you can see for every category, we are in process of building test accelerator packages. Now question comes, how often I should modify it? Of course, whenever there is a change in a platform, or whenever there is a new features are being added into the architecture, you have to revisit. You have to keep this process ongoing dynamically. But as a very first step towards the AI model creation, first define or bucketized your business into the categories. Then, how you define the consumption model of this reusable package. So, we categorized it as a pre-built test validation script. So, every test accelerator package will have the test validation script. And we categorized it as day 0, day 1 extended, day 2, all this category. For your business it could be different. I'm just bringing up an example to give a flavor how the model generation can be taken place. So you have defined the business pillar, you have defined how the test consumable packages can be done, and you are associating the reusable packages along with that. Is that so? My baseline of the architecture is being prepared at this point of time. Now next step is that automation the test model. So you might be using a test framework which is already in place in your organization for a decade or over the period, and it is giving a very fruitful result. Now, every framework, whenever they execute the test execution, they generate certain output. And those output, we call it as the report. Now, automation test model is a simplistic AI driven model which will cover automated modeling of all reusable test assets in a specific domain. I explained in the previous slide that how domain and test accelerator packages are being correlated. Now, that particular input has to be fed into your model, and model will automatically be able to identify for a specific domain what all test cases has to be executed. If it is able to do that, then of course it will be able to do that automated script identification also for ready for execution, which is associated with those reusable test assets. And before the test execution starts, it from your past execution data, model will be able to analyze what input data have been already consumed, and it will identify a pattern which will be related or associated with your platform feature change or product feature change, and how the product line is being emulated. That should be designing part of the model will be automatically being handled. So in a baseline statement, the automation test model should be able to recognize the pattern of code change or product change or feature change automatically, design the input test set data, linked it with your reusable test asset, and identify the automated test script to be executed. And finally, your test execution report will be forwarded to your existing test management framework. And from there, you can see that test coverage output plus requirement coverage mapping plus how it is being executed and what the result. So test model will analyze all the data and will be able to generate the outcome in a single pane of view. Makes sense? But the journey is not very easy here. Okay. So to start this model creation, I have just given, I have just tried to bring into the board what should be the way to do that. um, in organization level we are still in process of doing that, because you can see that the process is not a very easy piece of cake. So first thing first, we have to first prepare a data analysis model. So take all existing set of test case, categorize them, perform the data analysis. Next piece of work would be milestone would be prepare a data model. So when you prepare a data model, remove the redundant test cases, rank those test cases based on their actual execution frequency from past. So you have to create the model generating all your past execution data that you might have already in hand, optimize the existing test cases, categorize them linked with code module or the platform module. In some cases, code may not be applicable if you are not in the software industry. In case of network testing, you might be changing the devices, upgrading the devices. So linked with that particular module. Link the data model with the code base while performing code check, outset a trigger to choose proper set of test cases using the data model. So the data model has to be fed back into your code base, and revise the data model with your input whenever you execute. So data model cannot be built up in a single shot. It has to be churned into dynamic iterative way. Feed the model, revise, train it, find out how accurate results you are getting out of it. And that is why your predictive test identification model would be built up and finally would be ready for your consumption. Why we talk about it? What is the business impact it is going to bring it out? So first thing first is that faster execution of your test automation is needed. There were certain point of time in our industry when people were running behind the test automation just because we have to optimize the test execution process. Industry has moved from that era. So we need to understand nowadays, if we would like to bring out the test automation impact in our execution process or delivery process, we need to think much faster. And thinking much faster means you have to identify the whole test automation process in much faster way. And that is where AI driven test automation predictive data model is needed. Where we talk about continuous testing, accelerated deployments, there it is a boom to the market. When we talk about unification of our all test automation assets as part of CI/CD city, because DevOps is acquiring a very huge market, and there is no concept of traditional test automation process nowadays. So if you would like to market the test automation process as part of your agile process or agile methodology, we have to move much faster. And that is where the business impact comes into the picture. How automatically you can define a AI driven test model integrated with the CI/CD DevOps framework that can take your build from development lab to pre-production lab to production lab. That is where it is needed. Make the system level testing, solution level testing much faster. That is where the business impact comes into the picture. We have done certain analysis on the projected return on investment based on our effort in towards this work. So manual scripting, earlier days it used to take 30 minutes. When we jump into the test script generation or the test flow execution, it used to take 10 minutes. Now automated test script generations with AI driven model, our prediction that this will get into 2 minutes, cut down the time of execution into 2 minutes. So you can expect effort savings of 67 to 90% for automated test script generation. A self-healing process, which is part of any AI driven data model. So traditional approach, you have to do the analysis, you have to go back to the system, then again you have to edit everything and get into 10 minutes time to identify that how the test script has to be updated, right? AI based model will do it in 4 minutes time. That is what the expected output, where the self-healing of your test script will not take much time. So you are essentially going to do an effort saving of 60% over there. So, key takeaways. When we are talking for the continuous testing, the approach of the data driven model has to be a microservice based architecture so that you can easily deploy it, easily integrate with any industry standard test automation framework. Vendor agnostic delivery lifecycle, we are compatible with, we can talk about that data model has to be compatible with NetOps DevSecOps approach, which is quite prominent in today's industry standards. The process automation, the a framework which is easy to use, do not need extensive training to handle, because understanding the test automation framework, how to use it in your project, it's always cumbersome. So you can consider a test automation model. If you are driven it with by AI, it would be a single shop for your all type of test automation. um, we are working towards it. Any options, suggestions from this open forum, I'm ready to hear, offline, online, anything, I'm ready to answer. Any clarification you need. So at this point of time, our test AI driven test model is able to improve 50% time to market. We are seeing a continuous growth of our business with this implementation. We are looking forward to make it more robust with OpenAI framework, uh, which should be marketable for all our extensive customers and in general can be built up a concept overall, right? So if anything over here you would like to questions, I'm happy to help. Else you can reach out to me at any point of time. This is my contact details and my organization manager contact details. You can reach either of us or both of us. I would be happy to help out. So with this, I close my call over here and hand it over back to Paul again. So that's pretty much from my side today.
Thank you, Sudipta. So I'm going to try and keep you on for a few more minutes. Actually, you actually went short, so I'm trying to hopefully we can have a few questions and have. I'm asking some people on here. We do have about 30 minutes until our next speaker. So I'm going to go look and remind everybody, if you jump onto the YouTube channel, if you jump to this stream from LinkedIn, that's great. We appreciate that. But you can also find this streaming off of YouTube. And if you jump into the YouTube channel, you can actually ask questions on the chat over there and do some stuff there. So one of the questions we got over there was from Alyssa Okini. I hope I didn't mess it up too much. And Alyssa was asking, what are the 4 types of AI that I guess you may have mentioned during the presentation? Can you address that?
Yeah. So, 4 types of AI are being categorized by reactive, limited memory, theory of mind, and self aware. So, reactive AI is considered that where it has no memory, only responds to a different stimuli, like you reply, I reply, right? This is called the reactive. The way the model is being formed in such a way, like you get certain things to be immediately answered by the model, right? Answered by the AI model. So if you are using, say, for example, chat gpt or any open AI framework, you just ask the question. If the backend AI model has the exact matching pattern of your question being asked, it will immediately reply to you. That is called the reactive AI model. Then next come to the limited memory. Limited memory means it uses memory to learn and improve its responses, right? So what does that mean? It means in your AI model, there should be a memory engaged over there. So if your model is not able to answer certain questions which is not being recognized as a predefined pattern in the data model, then any new keyword it is coming from the user, it is getting into as a feedback into the data model. So data model will store that particular new ask or new question as a new pattern over there, and it will fed into the system so that it can do its own analysis to find the closest match and provide you the closest replicable, closest accurate answer over there. That is what we call limited memory. Then next come third one comes the theory of mind. Theory of mind means understands the need of other intelligent entities. That means the data model should be intelligent on its own to recognize any new pattern of questions or new pattern of design and fed into the system and find out the closest option available over there. So there is a difference between limited memory and theory of mind. Don't get confused between these two. Okay, limited memory means is just fed the answer, doesn't recognize the pattern, but theory of mind means it will recognize the new pattern, find out where it can match, it shows you all probable alternative solutions that you are looking from the pattern database have being carried by the AI model, right? The fourth one is the self-aware model. Okay. So self-aware model is like human-like intelligence, and it's a self-awareness. It's as part of the many researches, this model is doesn't exist as of now. You can search over there. There is a huge paper has been published by MSU on that. The human like intelligence and self awareness model is considered as the next generation model where our all regular works, if you think about it, not only the test automation industry, our all regular daily lives work will be replaced by a machine, and that machine would be operated by a data model. That is what we call the self aware model. So these are all four prominent structures of or four different types of AI as per my knowledge. I hope I'm able to answer the question.
That was great. In fact, what I was thinking of is I'm going to start a quick demo over here, and we can maybe chat about this because I've been playing with ChatGPT this week,
Yep.
and it blows my mind. It hits at least two, if not four, of your errors points over there. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you what ChatGPT looks like over here. We should be able to see that in just a moment. Let me see if that will.
So while you are bringing up that, Paul, I think I see one question is that
Oh yeah, go ahead.
over there from Atul, he asked, "Can you explain accelerators better, please?" So Atul, we have designed one accelerator. Actually, I must say we are in process of designing this test accelerator, which still under investigation over organization level, but our goal is that through this accelerator we would like to define all domain specific test scenarios to be automated and define the scope whenever there is a platform change happens automatically. So we called it as a test accelerator because it has got all predefined domain specific reusable test assets accumulated. That is where. And if you would like to get a demo about it, I didn't bring the demo because it's a proprietary information, so I would be happy to get connected with you offline.
Okay, cool. I just changed my name over here to ChatGPT. Let me put that back as Paul. I was thinking I had it on the screen. So let me ask you. Okay, here we go. So I've got my screen shared over here, and this is ChatGPT. If anyone hasn't seen this yet, uh, basically what you can do is you can ask it any question, and I've been asking it all sorts of stuff about JavaScript, like how, let's say, how can I create a dictionary in JavaScript? We'll do that. Just off the top of my head, did I spell it right? And it sits there and thinks about it, and then it starts giving us a response that tells us what it does. And it also throws in code as it writes on the fly, describing on how I can create a dictionary, how values are in there, how I can set it up. Uh, would you say this is hitting your first requirement for AI on in your list of 4 out there?
Yeah, it is basically getting interlinked with the third one, what we are talking about
Okay.
in theory of mind, so that it can find out what are all probable options. I just want to add one more point over here, Paul, as well, because see, certain things have are the open to use for the entire forum. Certain things, there is a Google speech recognition system which can be integrated with any AI driven model, where you can speak and the speech can be recognized and can bring out all the information from your data model. That is one solution. um, we are working internally in the organization level to make our delivery management process much faster. Test automation is one pillar, but when you talk about agile process or agile delivery process, there is a scrum management, there is people invest a lot of time over there. So your
Yep.
project management can made easier with such model as well. So that is where the chat gpt comes into the live picture.
Cool. You did mention that one of the things was kind of remembering what was said before. So I'm going to try this. Convert to TypeScript. We'll do that. I feel like I should say convert to TypeScript, please. I've been playing with it so much. It feels like a real person. Like, I demand you to change all my code and make it work. So it says to convert Java's code to create a dictionary object. And so it remembered that I was talking about a dictionary object in JavaScript, and now it's converting to TypeScript. So now it creates a type of that. So it's actually having memory of what my discussion was as it chugged along over here.
Yeah.
So I think that was your third. Was it your third one? I forget which one was the
Yes.
one where.
Third one, the theory of mind.
Theory of mind, which is pretty cool. Let's see if there's any other questions here. Let's see. How much of future testing will automation over manual testing? How much of future testing will be automation over manual testing?
if you
Um,
can
Good.
if you can implement a AI driven data model, industry is claiming it's 99.99%. It's a hard figure to achieve, but people are thinking in that direction. There are a lot of things are happening on the test automation industry, where last year in Starist 2022, there was a virtual summit has been presented, where people were talking about making test automation 100% over manual testing, which is a very, very, what I must say, that is a unrealistic figure. But there is a chance that where our all daily work or all manual effort into a fully automation model. And if you think about in little broader perspective, if we can make it out a AI driven data model, our manual testing is going to be much more reduced. In what sense, if you ask me, the question is that there will be a certain point of time where your code being changed and test automation model will be able to detect what to test automatically, right? A human intervention will not be needed. So we are not talking about that manual testers will not be there in the industry. there are definitely certain amount of things has to be carried through manual testing unless the code is stabilized. But if there is a data model, it can definitely get into in that space.
Well, I do see a kind of a downside is that I'm awake 8 to 16 hours a day, and this thing can be up 24 hours a day. And I could come into work in the morning and find it's assigned me a lot of work to get done during the day. Um, I also say, as you to the point, trying to get to 100, 99.999% four nines of, right now we talk about uptime, four nines uptime, where everything's always up and not down. Automation of 99%, I don't see that ever actually becoming a reality, even with this thing over here. I would like to tell managers when I talk to them. Sometimes I hear, I'll ask them, "What is the coverage that we're looking to do for automation?" And they'll say 100%. And I'm sorry, we're getting a little side
Yeah,
chat from Marcus Merrell.
even after 100% coverage also we get many more issues from the production when
Yes,
the product gets into. So this
yes.
100% test coverage is realistic figure, or is it a can we justify it? So your AI driven test model can do it automatically, that justification, right? So basically you feed into the data and you find out how good test coverage it is going to given. And there is a concept of code coverage also. When we talk about the code coverage, we often talks about the unit testing to be performed against that specific piece of the code. So if you can extend this model beyond your system testing and all, this can give an exemplary result for unit testing as well. You can identify what to be tested against that input data set.
It's great. As I was saying, I try to talk people off the ledge of 100% automation because there are just areas that you just can't automate. The way I look at it is, if you get to, it's like the grading that we had in school. If you got 90%, that's an A. You get 80%'s a B. 70, 60. If you're below 60%, you didn't quite make the grade on that.
Above 90%, anything is still A. So it doesn't matter
Yes,
90 to 100 what you are doing.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Oh man. So I did ask it another question. I asked it over here, how can I click a button in Cypress? And it sat there and said, "Oh yeah, you can do. Here's how you do Cypress," and then basically gave a button name, which isn't quite that, but it did give us a CSS button as an example, which is fine. Uh, and convert. I'm going to say convert that to XPath, since that's on here, since we're having a lot of fun over here. Anybody have any questions on that you want me to ask the chat GPT? We got another question coming here. Let's see. Alyssa asked, what coding language is most in demand for 2023 if I want to make myself more marketable? So Peter?
Okay, so as per my knowledge, this 2023 we are heading towards Python mostly. So Python is the most prominent language at this point of time. But nonetheless, people are also interested in working on JavaScript, Cypress, and all those. These are also marketable. So it depends on which industry you are targeting for. So depending on that, the definition of marketable gets changed. So that is what you need to study, and you need to find out that how this thing goes on.
Yeah, I would agree on that. Python and JavaScript. I've been working in JavaScript for the last 2 years, working in WebDriver IO. So I did learn some interesting things about promises and async awaits and all sorts of stuff on that. One of the things I tell people is that there is something called, I'm going to call it today, the hello world of test automation. And what that is, it's the first script you write, which is put in my username, put in my password, and click the login button. That's hello world for automation. And I realized the first few weeks I was working in JavaScript was that because it had different threads, it could actually execute those in any sort of order. So it would click the login button, put in my username and my password, and generate an error. And then I'd have to say, okay, this is new. Usually my scripts go in order, but because the internet is, has been long since defined as we need to get everything up there as fast as possible. Let's have multiple threads build a page. It's great for building a web page, but it's really wonky for trying to have an automation script go through steps in the correct order. Let's see. I have a couple more questions over here. Alyssa was actually Jay Sean was actually responding to Alyssa. Let's
Yeah,
see.
I
Go
think
ahead.
Martin asked a question: how can we use ChatGPT within our organization with proprietary knowledge base and governance? There is certain challenge, Martin. So if you see that your organization has a very strict policy of using any open source product, then you might not be able to use it, which is applicable in case of our organization. So we couldn't use chat gpt as it is. So what we have done, we have used rasa framework, which is an alternative of the chat gpt. We got connected with the google speech recognition system, and we build it up on an internal framework which is equivalent to chat gpt for your proprietary knowledge base and governance. So what basically chat gpt does at this point of time, it has got an ai model in the backend which will retrieve any information available across the data model being fed up with the pattern recognition system and pull it out as an answer in the screen, as you can see, right? So same thing you can develop on your own in your organization if open source is not supported across many organization. So you can define a data model, feed it over there, your entire knowledge base of your organization, and get the information out of that. And of course organization has different pillar where cross information are not being shared. So this kind of tool is more useful for any organization to be consumed when you would like to know that what other business unit is doing in the same line.
I was hoping for a different answer from ChatGPT. I asked something similar last week, and it says, I'm not connected to the internet, so I don't know what this is all about. And I just asked, who is Taylor Swift? And it goes, oh, yeah, well, this is Taylor Swift. I'm like, where are you getting this information? This has nothing to do with automation, but it did come up with a very good description of Taylor Swift. Can you tell us, is the tool that you're talking about with your you're working with, is that available to people who are listening here?
Yeah, that is available, but it's cisco proprietary information, and inside we are like selling it as a service. We call it as an intelligent chat ops engine, ice. You may not be able to see it inside cisco because it's still under development. So
Okay.
what we are trying to do, so cisco basically use internal messenger called webex, and cisco has a good business over there. So we have developed a ai model integrated with a messenger. It could be any messenger. You can use microsoft teams or you can use gtalk, anything like that. But the flavor is that you build up a data model, you go ahead with your knowledge base or internal knowledge base and governance and security process to be connected with your data model, feed it as an input to your data model, and then get connected with your internal organization messenger space and get it done with how to control your all over releases. Suppose you would like to find out a piece of code, right? You would like to do some device testing or device upgrade, L3 VPN upgrade. So you just say into your chat messenger saying that L3 VPN upgrade is needed. And that will give you all the options how this should be done. So it's basically a bot in front ends like a chat GPT, and back end your data model is being fed up by all your knowledge base and governance over there. And that is how the whole scenario works out.
Great. I'm not sure if I've got the right page over here. I did get ISE, but I think you said it was ICE.
No, you
But
will not get it, Paul,
I won't.
because
Okay,
it's a internal thing, and we do not disclose all internal things into the
not a problem. I get that. I get that. Cisco is actually a wonderful company. Hell, I'd throw up their stock price if I could. Um, uh, I actually tried to get a job over there at Cisco, but the problem is there's people who are so much more smarter than I am out there. But it is a great company. It's been around for a very long time. Everywhere I go, when there's anything that's got some servers sitting in a back room with a nice air conditioning unit next to it, there's a Cisco server sitting out there helping making sure the systems are working correctly. Um, and I don't mind giving you giving Cisco a shout out. There's I don't know of anybody else in the industry. I think they're number one in the industry in what they do. So and they do have a lot of cool products and services out there. Um, so do check out Cisco. Let's see. I got something else popped up here. Let's see. Um, Renuka.
Yes. So, Renuka, to answer your question, we use existing test automation. We use open source test framework. We use Cypress also as an open source test framework to feed out in our test automation. Um, you can, but that doesn't restrict you to use your own technology. If you have some in-house built test automation framework, you can definitely feed out in your AI driven test automation model. So understand one thing is that AI driven test automation is a concept. How we interpret it in a different level of industry in different region, that matters. Today might be in the networking side. Cisco is a networking company, but we have a software presence also. So networking and software domain we are interpreting in a different way. But if you get into, say, for microbiology domain and all those stuff, there also certain amount of testing happens. Bank domain also that happens. So whatever test automation tool is there for your particular domain or particular uh, product line, you can definitely feed it into your AI driven test model. There is no bar or no restrictions in terms of the language, testing language. So it's the concept, how you implement it, how we do it, how we make it mature. That's the part.
Great. I did also have an experience recently where something I've been doing for about 15 years, which is in the industry called self-healing objects. And I've written code where it's like, okay, the developer decided this link is now going to be a button, but all my scripts are broken because they were expecting a link descriptor. And I put in code that says, hey, if you can't find it as a link, go find it as a button. And it finds the button with the exact same stuff. Interestingly enough, in a meeting, someone looked at that and says, "Oh, that's AI stuff. I know all about that." I'm like, "It's close, yeah." And he was high enough level. I said, "Yeah, you're right. It is AI. Yes, it is." And I'm like, "It's not. It's just me writing some clever code." Um, but where's my point on that? There can be confusion between what's truly AI and what is just a lot of people writing clever code to make it look like it's actually AI. And I don't really have a problem either way. It's whatever way you solve a problem is fine as far as I'm concerned. Any thoughts on that?
So I would like to say one point over here. So AI has I as I said that AI has a strong presence in machine learning, right? And how we make the machine to learn our requisite or requirement, that matters. The other part is that when we talk about AI is closely associated with the robotics. So what do you understand by robotics means you give the instruction in a human readable format and machine understands that, but what functions being executed by the machines we do not know as a human. So this conversion of this natural language processing unit, NLPU, which sits between the machine to work and the human readable format, that is being defined by AI. Earlier days of AI, it has been talked about it's talked about applied intelligence. So how you apply the intelligence of the machine to understand what you would like to get as an outcome, that is overall concept of AI. AI is not a very new concept. It is just how we are interpreting it as part of the test automation that matters.
Yep, it's good. We only got about a minute left over here, so don't I don't see anything else going on that we have any additional questions. So, Sabina, any final closing remarks? Anything you want to talk about with Cisco? So, floor is yours.
Not related to Cisco. I would just like to make all the participants thanks for their to attending my session. I wanted to give a flavor that AI driven concept is not very new. We all are handling it by knowing or unknowingly in our test automation industry, but this is the time that we should proactively measure and consider that how it should be part of the AI driven data model. Thank you all for attending this session, and I hope to get connected. Anyone is interested to have in future discussions on from this session out. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Sabita. I'm going to ask our back end people if keep my screen on for. Actually, my screen's going to be on. I'm going to stop sharing my screen over here. Actually, no, we're going to keep that on there. And Sabita, again, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And we're going to move on to our next speaker, Marcus Merrell, in just a moment here. But I'm going to keep my screen up here, sharing for just a bit. I'm going to see if I've got over here. This is our stuff over here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Marcus Merrell. I learned about Marcus a long time ago. He may not realize this. It was back in June of 2008. I have gone back to the Wayback Machine. If you've not heard of the Wayback Machine, that's also web.archive.org. It goes and takes captures of old websites. And Marcus, with a friend of his, Will Rodin, had a website out there that was the testing automation software Inquisition, which was my first website that I found when I was playing around and learning my field. And I figured I'd give Marcus a little feeling of nostalgia going back to when we were working on this. By the way, as I mentioned earlier, Marcus and I met over here at Mercury World, and you can see how old what year that was in Las Vegas out there, October 8th. And if you go to one of the pages out here, you will find that Marcus had his description right here, if I can get it over here, of a presentation that he did. I hope I've got the right presentation being shown up here. Is that Marcus? Hopefully, that is wrong. The wrong person. That is not the right one. Of course not. I'm going to get the right one over here. Maybe it's on the. Hi, Marcus. I'm really trying to give you some credit for that wonderful presentation back in 2008.
Was it the one about
this page somewhere?
Pairwise testing? Was it about pairwise testing?
Yes, pairwise testing. I think that
I
might
still
be
talk
the
about
one
that. It's still an underexplored avenue for a lot of people.
Yes. So so Marcus and I, like I said, it goes back to 2008, and then we didn't really bump into each other. I hear about him in the field, and then in 2018, just before the pandemic, I bumped into him again, and over at Selenium conference here in Chicago, and said hi, and it was great to see him again. So I reached out to Marcus and see if he was if he could give us a presentation, and he kindly did. And so, Marcus, with that little history of there, I'm going to let you give a little bit better introduction to everybody. And by the way, Marcus is, I'm going to say he was one of the original automation people with QTP, UFT. So he's a Captain Mercury guy over there. In fact, I got my old Windrunner disc sitting right there as well. On my desk, I just got in with it. Marcus, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks. Now I got to figure out how to share my screen at some point. All right. So yeah, I'm Marcus. I'm actually the Vice President of Technology Strategy at Sauce Labs at this point. I've been doing test automation, started with APIs in 2001, fell in love instantly with how fast and responsive they are. And for some reason, I moved into UI testing, which is, not quite so fast, not quite so responsive, but still very interesting and still very necessary. So I started using Selenium, I guess, shortly after 2008, probably. I was using Mercury QTP, and then I heard about this tool called Selenium. And then I liked it so much, I started to get involved with the leadership and just sort of started helping them organize conferences around 2012. And so I've been there not since the beginning, but since, kind of close to the beginning, and was in, kind of in the room when the standards for the W3C committee got ratified, and was in the room for a lot of different things that happened. I haven't been a huge code contributor to it, but I'm, like to just be the person in the room helping to facilitate things. I'm a member of the project leadership committee, which helps grease the legal skids to make sure that things happen properly and that budgeting happens and all that stuff. I feel like there's a lot of contributions that you can make to open source that are not just code. Like if you're good at writing documentation, if you're good at handling, like I said, legal and logistical issues, there's a lot of people who are really good at writing code for open source that don't like doing any of that stuff. So I let them do that, and they let me do this, and it's a great separation responsibilities. I have written some code for Selenium, but it's not material. There's a very minor function within the new Selenium grid that was partly mine, and some documentation stuff like that. But anyway, right now I'm trying to convert all this knowledge of test automation over 20 years into a career as a technology strategist for one of the vendors in this space. My job at this point is to take appraise Sauce Labs' overall offering and figure out where the gaps are, and then figure out whether we should acquire our way into filling those gaps, acquire or build or partner in order to make those kinds of things happen. So we've made 4 acquisitions. We've partnered with 45, 50 companies. We do a whole bunch of product development, that kind of thing. So I'm not here to talk about Sauce Labs today, even though it is on my slides. I'm here to talk about accessibility. This has become a passion of mine, and I hope it will become a passion of yours as well. And I'll talk a little bit about not only what it means to make your website accessible and the kinds of things you can look for, but also why it's important, and then how to work that into automation. The automation won't be the primary focus of this, because I have assumed that I'm going to try to give you some resources, and you go and you do some research on it. I am curious now whether or not ChatGPT could actually be told to, do a test script with automation, with accessibility in it. My bet is you can say, write me a Selenium script, which I've seen it do. It does very well. And then you can probably say, now implement Axe Core to test this for accessibility also. And it'll hopefully it'll add just the 2 or 3 lines of code you would need to do to sort of give you an overall idea of whether or not something the script you're working on will test for accessibility, which is fascinating. It's funny. GPT has exploded all over this industry in the last 2 weeks, and I think it's great. And you didn't ask me for a commentary on this, but I'm going to give you just a couple seconds. One is I am come at me on Twitter, but I am not a fan of Cucumber and BDD in general. And it's not because I don't think the tech works. It's because I think generally it has to be implemented culturally before you can even consider whether or not the tool can be implemented. But that said, we asked ChatGPT to give us a BDD script and then give us the step definitions, and it did a flawless job. And I think one of the problems that people get into trouble with Cucumber is they start to use their spec files to talk about web elements, to say, click on this button, fill out this form, put this in this text field, put this in this text field. And to me, I think that a behavior-driven script should not talk about web elements. A behavior-driven script should talk about user behavior, like log into this website using username, password. No click, just log in, because that's the verb the users care about. Users care about submit this form using this information. They don't care about enter text into first name, enter text into last name. They care about submit the form. because I'm gonna make a kind of another controversial statement here, is that unless you're working on a video game or a streaming platform or a social media site, maybe a couple of others, people don't want to actually use your software. Nobody wants to use your software. They didn't come here to fill out the date picker on the flight selection. They came here to, your travel site, they came here to buy a ticket. They came here to enable themselves to get on an airplane. They didn't come here to use your fancy bells and whistles. So it's important for me that a BDD script capture the behavior that the user is trying to exhibit and not the elements of the website that you designed for them to interact with. And ChatGPT did a magnificent job of capturing the user behavior and then converting that into step definitions and then converting that into Selenium. And it did all the steps involved. So to me, it represents a really interesting leap forward in getting teams that want to adopt something like Cucumber, getting them a step up. Now, I'm not going to talk about this much longer, but basically what I'm concerned about is people leaping to the conclusion that this is going to replace our jobs, because 90% of test automation is test maintenance. 10% is test creation. And that's the part that I think GPT is going to help us with. It's not going to replace us even there yet, but I'm not sure it has any role to play in maintenance. And that's just something that we need to, time will tell whether or not that's true. That's just something to keep in mind. Okay, let's talk about accessibility, what you actually asked me here for. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will work. All right. Does anyone see a lot of annoying flickering, or is that okay? Paul, does that look good? Not hearing anything. All right. I'm going to launch into it, and I am assuming that chat will explode if I'm doing something wrong or if you're not seeing my screen. Okay. So today we're here to talk about testing for accessibility. And we're going to do this by talking about the common problems that we see in accessibility. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a recipe and some tooling for getting started, and then we'll move into automation. I'm not going to show you any code. I'm not going to inundate you with a whole bunch of tools, but I'm going to tell you enough to hopefully build a foundation upon that you can take back to your team and immediately get started with this kind of thing.
Hey, Marcus, I'm going to jump in here. The resolution looks really low on this side over here.
Fascinating. I don't know why it looks that terrible. It looks really okay on mine. That's fascinating.
Maybe try to unshare and reshare one more time. Maybe it's the equivalent of turn the computer off and on again.
Yeah, right. I actually don't know how to stop sharing. I apologize for this.
No problem. Hey, that's what we do. It's hardware and software, and things happen. It's like I said, I'm a pessimist that things actually work. I'm surprised that the internet comes up every day.
Yes. Now that's camera resolution I just messed with. So it's still sharing because to me it shows that it is okay.
We might have to live with it. Just we'll go with full screen, but we'll see if maybe the guys behind the scenes can handle it, can come up with something.
Truthfully, I don't know how to stop sharing. I think that's the problem. There it is. The problem is I had the window was too narrow for me to see all the options that were there. Okay.
Do you have multiple monitors?
Yes, I do.
Maybe a different. When you do the share, you can actually pick a different monitor, throw it onto another monitor. Let's see if that has any sort of issue, or that helps at all.
All right, so I just shared a window.
Dimitri says no big deal. Thank you, Dimitri.
Still want to make it look like we've been here before. All right, so I shared a window. It's not showing up yet. There it is.
Much better. You're awesome. Go full screen. You're good to go.
Great. Fantastic. All right, so what I did for anyone in the future is instead of sharing the entire desktop, I shared just the window. So troubleshooting accomplished. All right. So accessibility. Thank you, Paul, for jumping in. We're going to go over why test. Now, I'll be candid here. When I first designed this talk, it was for an audience of people who understood accessibility but not testing. So I put in a few slides about why we test. This audience probably doesn't need that, but I left just a couple of slides in so that we can find a common foundation together, because there was a talk in the last session about this track about coverage, and this question comes up all the time. How do we test for code coverage, or what coverage goals should we be looking at? And I just wanted to sort of level set and make sure we're speaking the same language when we talk about testing in general. Then I'll talk about where accessibility testing fits into the process and where it maybe should fit, because those are two different things. And then I'll cover the 10 most common accessibility issues that cover something like 95% of all accessibility issues that you find on the web. Like if you cover these 10, you're probably, you may not be AA compliant, but you will probably lessen your liability exposure. And I'll explain what that means. Then at the end, I'll give you kind of a survey of tools. It's not really a survey of tools as much as it is a survey of considerations. And so we will talk about a couple of specific tools. Okay, so one thing that I've been a little bit obsessed with lately is this concept of test coverage. At a previous job, I had actually at several previous jobs, I have had, as the head of quality assurance or the test automation person, I've had a CTO tell me, you need to deliver 100% test code coverage as part of your automation program. And my reaction to that is usually I have to, take a few deep breaths. And then I have to essentially say, is it okay for me to define what 100% means? Because there's no way you're going to get 100% test code coverage of everything that we do. It's simply impossible. And of course they dismiss that out of hand, and I try to explain, but what I found is that it's a failing argument. So basically what happens is I've stopped asking whether or not I can define 100%. And if a CTO is of the mindset that they're not going to be convinced to do the right thing, I have two choices. Either figure out how to display 100% in a way that actually is sane, meaning 100% of reasonable coverage, or I have to quit, which is actually what I did in this one case, because they were relentless. And, they have, in the 4 years since I've been at that company, they have gotten no closer. In fact, that CTO is no longer there. So in my opinion, testing is a risk-based exercise. Testing is about identifying, mitigating, managing, eliminating risk. It is not about coverage. Coverage is an attempt to tell a story about risk, but it's an imperfect, flawed, reactive way to look at how you manage risk. And that's why I wanted to level set with us today, is that when I talk about testing, I do a little bit mean coverage, but I mean coverage as an input to figuring out where your risk exposure still is. Because you can think about accessibility in two different ways. You can think about it as, this is the right thing to do for me as a developer who wants to promote the usage of my software to everyone. I want to make my software accessible to everyone because it's the right thing to do, because people need to use my software to get something done. And there's a statistic that I could probably pull a reference to it, to a report called Every Experience Matters, which basically says that if you're making web software, 15% of web users need assistive technology in order to get daily tasks done. And that over 60% of those users are unable on a daily basis to get certain things done because the software they're using is not accessible. So people aren't thinking about this as they develop software, and they should be, because it's the right thing to do. On the other side of that, though, there's the reality of 2022, which is that if your site is not accessible, there is a great potential for litigation and lawsuits. In 2019, I think it was 2019, Domino's Pizza was sued because their website was not accessible and a person with visual impairment could not buy a pizza. And the Supreme Court of the United States declared that not having an accessible website for food ordering is the exact equivalent of not providing a wheelchair ramp to a brick and mortar store. So if your website is not accessible, you are not making it ADA compliant, and therefore you are at risk of being sued. And there is precedent now from the United States Supreme Court that says you're not going to win that lawsuit. So you can either fight this battle from the position of, I want to do the right thing for all of my users and potentially increase my market share as a bonus, or there is the risk of litigation on the other side that says, my job, my company is at risk. And I don't know if you've ever heard the term patent troll, something you can Google, but a patent troll is someone who is usually a small law firm that goes and finds patents that are being violated from one company to the next. And so they'll go to the company that's violating the patent and say, if you don't stop violating this patent, we're going to tell this other company that you're violating their patent, and you're going to get sued. Pay us a lot of money and we'll help you fix it. They also at the same time go to the company that holds the patent and says, this company is violating your patent. Would you like to pay us to sue them? And it happens both ways. There are now accessibility trolls growing in number by the day, looking for sites to sue that are not accessible. And this is becoming a huge issue everywhere. And if it's true in America, it is more true in Canada and Europe, because there are actually stricter standards for this that are more widely applied all over both continents. So if this is not currently an issue that you're thinking about, it's an issue that you need to start thinking about. And there's a chance that if you're in the QA organization or QE organization, there is another group entirely separate from you that is already thinking about this. But the way they tend to think about it, and I'll get to this here in a few minutes, is they tend to get to it late, right before the release happens. And you are in a uniquely good position to help them pull that earlier in the cycle and make sure that accessibility considerations are being covered early on instead of late. So people typically think of testing as looking for bugs. If you ask the average developer, the average person on the street, what is QA? Testing for bugs. I'm looking to see if something is broken. I was told that there's a requirement that a user gets to do something. I want to find bugs with that requirements, and I want to ensure that everything works. For example, they said the button would be blue, but it wasn't blue. And this is how people start in the industry. But what I always try to think is, and what has really helped accelerate my career, has been taking this one step further and saying, what effect does this have on the user? What effect does this have on my business if the user experience is bad? What effect does this have on my revenue if the user experience is bad for a huge swath of people, or even for a smaller swath of people who need assistive technology, but for whom I have not designed a sufficiently low contrast site that allows it to be usable by everyone? What I want is for people to start thinking about risk, not just coverage. So how this applies to accessibility is, what is the risk to my website or to my legal department if I have a site that is not showing sufficient color contrast to allow people to use the site the way they need to be used? And nowhere in there is coverage. I once had a team of brilliant offshore Selenium experts build a suite of 100 tests to work on the user profile editing page for the site that I worked on at the time. And I was so proud of them. The tests were durable, they weren't flaky, they passed, and if they failed for a good reason. Rare to have such good, high-quality Selenium code. And I was having lunch shortly after that with an analytics person in business intelligence at Retail Me Not. Sorry, I just said the company name. That's all right. You can tell on LinkedIn that I work there. And they said, why in the world would you write 100 test cases for an area of the site that 1% of our users ever go to and that provides no revenue whatsoever? You have done a great job of coverage of a site that of an area of the site that presents zero risk to the organization if somebody just can't update their username or something like that. You could do a few tests for that, but there's no reason to write 100. So this is all about spreading the surface area of the test automation to apply to the biggest areas of risk. And to be able to say, going into a test suite, it's not, I ran a bunch of tests and here's what the coverage was. It was, I know going into this what risks I am covering and what risks I am letting go of. It's not a reactive outcome. It's a proactive statement. And that's how we should be thinking about accessibility. Because, like I said, you now are held to the same standards as a brick and mortar place that does not have a wheelchair ramp. Design cannot rescue failed content, which means if you're doing this so late in the process that you need to completely redesign the site, redesigning the site after it's done, it can't save you. You have to do it little by little. You have to change the engine inside the running jet plane. You have to make sure that it's a very slow process, very painful if you're getting to it that late. The truth is, most people are getting to it that late. So you have to work really hard to make sure it's correct. Now, there's a lot of different standards that apply. This actually is a very abbreviated list. WCAG, I don't recall what acronyms stand for. I almost never recall what acronyms stand for. I apologize. I don't know if it's an age thing or what, but it's something to do with the W3C standards for accessibility guidelines. I think that's mostly what those letters mean. You should probably decide where you are, where you want to go in terms of how accessible do you need to make the site. There are different compliance standards. If you're writing a blog that is purely informational with maybe some ads in it, you could probably go with single A. People with disabilities will find it. I mean, sorry, you shouldn't go with single A. You should go with double A. If you're single A, it means that people will find it impossible to access the information. You should shoot for double A, which means that I can't guarantee that everything will be on here, but at least I have made an effort to say that you can utilize my website. When you're a business or a government entity, you probably need to go with AAA, which means there's a really, really good chance that if you have a visual or hearing impairment, you will be able to use my website. So you need to decide upon the standards where you are. Are you A, going to AA, eventually going to AAA, or are you AA already trying to go to AAA? And the main mechanism for figuring this kind of thing out is an audit. Now, there are firms all over the world that do accessibility audits. One I in particular like is called DQ, DEQUE. They are a consulting firm that's a good partner with my company, and they will help you train developers on how to work within the accessibility guidelines to make your software accessible. And they will also do training. They'll do audits. And one thing that they do that I think is wonderful, that we're actually going to try to put out there for Selenium Conference in March in Chicago, is they provide the ability to run something called an accessibility empathy lab, which lets you simulate visual impairments, hearing impairments, that kind of thing, and utilize web technology that is not accessible. So it's a poorly designed site that has no real good way of being used by someone with visual impairment, and they'll simulate the disability, putting a blindfold, something like that, and make you use the keyboard and not use the mouse, and use screen readers to understand what it's like for people who are using your site without good accessibility tools in it. And I think it's a wonderful thing for people to go through, and I can't wait. I've never actually been through it, but I hear wonderful things about it, because it puts you in the seat of the user who's just trying to get something done, just trying to order a pizza, something really simple. What if it was something really important, like healthcare, managing medications, things like that? We need to understand how to do these things for our users. So, as I referenced earlier, accessibility tends to be done kind of at the end, usually manually, right at the end, right before release. And it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a whole lot of extra things have to go into it. If it's like a lot of companies we work with, it's people who are not experts in accessibility, and potentially people who don't have any sort of impairment or ability to understand the impairment itself. They're just told to look for certain things, and that's it. They're not experts. And then in my experience, also, when they do find an issue, it tends not to have the highest priority when it comes to getting fixed. So this is another issue that I think that like most areas of testing, I think we need to start considering to shift left. How do we bring this earlier in the life cycle? We can do it via, I apologize for the low resolution of this image, but the link to it is in the bottom right. How do we work and weave accessibility testing and ideas into a design of a website as we're pushing it through its early phases? We can start on this as early as wireframe. There's no reason, if we have a clear vision of what our software needs to look like, we couldn't start attaching text and descriptions to even wireframe and placeholder images within our site, which then can be used by the developer as we move the software through to its more deployable state. There's no reason we couldn't start doing these things earlier. And if you think about doing 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there across 100 different wireframes early on in the process, how much time that will save later when we're trying to shoehorn and retrofit all of our accessibility descriptions later. There's no chance it will be as good if we're doing it, under duress, in a rush, toward the end of the cycle, when we're not the ones who designed it. Especially if you're in QA, there's a really good chance that it's going to be up to you to start doing commits to add alt text and IDs and labels to these different web elements, and that just seems like it's suboptimal in order to get these things in place when they could have been done much earlier. But the truth is, it requires a lot more comprehensive design to do this perfectly right, to get to AAA accessibility. And I think this is the way this is going to start moving in the industry, in my opinion. So one way I would advise QA people early in their careers to get started is to become an expert in this, and to start talking to your developers about this. Don't be annoying. Don't put it in their face constantly. What I would say is make contributions yourself, not just open tickets, but get in there and see what you can do to the code itself to make it more accessible. Come up with examples, put people through the empathy lab, or at least tell the story of the empathy lab if you're able to go through it, that kind of thing. Weave it in earlier. Now, I'm going to go through a list of these things. It's going to take a little while. Hopefully I have enough time. But 95% of accessibility problems come down to 10 accessibility issues. And I'm not going to show you how to automate 95%. I'm going to show you how to automate between 50 and 60% by using certain tools in combination with each other. Now, this won't save everything, and there's no way I can represent that if you do all of these things, you will be AAA compliant. For that, you should run an audit. But I do want to walk through the most common things that run through. And when I say these things, my hope is that you will actually start to, oh yeah, that, I know how to do that. Or that's a thing that I've definitely seen on sites, and it's annoyed me even as a fully able person. I think that it's a good list, and I think it's really worth exploring, especially on your own time when you come out of here. So the first thing is image alt text. When you show an image on a site, people typically, one of the major assistive technologies that people use is called a screen reader. It's something that's made by Apple or Windows. Oh, thank you. I only have 15 minutes. All right, that's fine. I'll blow through these. So alt text is something that a screen reader will use to tell you what is happening inside of an image. So the flowchart I just showed you, the alt text would actually tell you not only what is in the image, but also why that image is significant, and try to do it briefly, succinctly. And that's why it takes time. It takes time to write a good, accurate, succinct description, a lot more time than it takes to write a long, bloated, very, very long description. So alt text in images is a very, very big deal for screen readers. Sometimes it's too verbose. Sometimes it takes away from the primary intent. Sometimes no alt image is provided at all. I used to do recording for the blind and dyslexic here in Austin, Texas. And when I would read, I'd come across an image, and you are instructed to provide a decent description of the image and try to make it no more than about 15 to 20 seconds. But you're trying to convey the main idea of the image itself. And that's what could be represented here in the alt text. If you don't use alt text, the image source will be read, which is going to be a URL, which it's going to sound like the screen reader saying http://something.com/ and you don't want that. That's terrible user experience. And sometimes the text is provided for an image that's purely decorative and should have an empty alternate attribute. So if you're doing a presentation, a lot of my presentations, not this one, a lot of mine have cat GIFs. And if I have a cat GIF in an image, there's no reason to populate that. That's just there for visual candy for people, so that they'll continue to listen to me while I'm talking, and they won't phase out or something like that. So when we move on from that, there are also considerations for keyboard users, because people with visual impairments have trouble using a mouse in general. Not always, but that's a general statement. Keyboard users need to be able to tab and navigate using exclusively the keyboard, and to have an indicator of where focus is at the moment. Now, you should create a highlight somehow, letting the user know where these links are going, where they are, what form field they're on, something like that, where they know where the current input focus is. I have a link here to an article about this, and I assume we'll be sending these materials out to everyone. Proper labels on forms are a huge deal. You need to be able to, people need to be able to fill out forms and put the right text in the right field. And if you don't use proper labels, what you generally will get is you'll hear the screen reader will say text field, text field, text field, text field, text field, which is absolutely unhelpful. And you can imagine it's basically impossible to get done what you need to get done if you have to fill out a field, and that's all the screen reader can tell you. What you need to do, what you need to hear is first name, last name, phone number, a description for the different text fields that are in the form. Seems like common sense, but I see this all the time. Now, we need to have descriptive text for hyperlinks. There are so many hyperlinks in any given website. You need to put descriptive names on them, because otherwise they will read the URL to you, and that nobody wants that. And you also should try to stay away from saying click me or click here or click this for more information. You need to provide in just a few words the precise purpose or destination that the link is going to. And I understand that this is going to be difficult. It takes time, but the earlier you do it, the less you need to worry about it later. It is like eating your vegetables, but it's also like eating your vegetables when someone else's life depends on it. It's absolutely necessary to do this. Sometimes the link areas are too small. Do not force your users to do mouse target practice. That goes for any kind of disability. It goes for perfectly abled people as well. I hate target practice. I tend to hate it when form text fields don't use a fixed width font. So I can actually select the letter I without having to do a 3-pixel margin of error on that. So don't force people to play target practice with their mouse. Make the link space readable and easy to find. Tables are difficult. Tables are used for visual communication, but they're two-dimensional, and screen readers are only one-dimensional. So you have to use proper table HTML markup, and don't get super fancy with your CSS and JavaScript unless you also have markup, standard markup in the background that a screen reader can pick up on. I have seen the case where there's a div embedded within an iframe, within a div, within an iframe, within some other kind of proprietary component that's inside of a table cell, and the screen reader doesn't even know there's data in it. So that can become a huge problem. I might be exaggerating a tiny bit. So labels, simplified table structures, and style it however you want. Just make sure that the standard HTML code is in there somewhere as a cue for the screen reader. Heading elements are extremely important for organization of data for people who need a screen reader. People tend to use these purely for visual layouts and emphasis. You should be using notes, tips, and bolds and other kinds of fonts for other kinds of emphasis. Heading elements are not only really good for getting screen readers to help, but also they really help with SEO. Google has very exacting ways of indexing sites and favoring sites that have very well laid out content using H1 through H6. If you have more than one H1 on a page, your screen reader is going to be confused and your SEO will tank. That is a true statement. So make sure your pages are organized in a way that makes a lot of sense. Color contrast is another one. You need to make sure that the color contrast between web elements is 4.5 to 1 for text content, meaning you can't just have light gray on a white background. It needs to seriously contrast in order for people to be able to see it. 3 to 1 for interface elements. It's a lot more important to have high contrast for text than it is for buttons and other kinds of interface elements. But at a minimum, you need to have super high contrast for text on a page. Now, I have another link here that I will like for people to go to and visit, because it has a checker that'll actually tell you, whether or not a given URL is fitting within this or not. It'll flag your low contrast issues. So sometimes you want to embed a non-accessible document within your accessible document, and you need to hold other people accountable for this as well. You are, in a way, responsible for all the content that you have, but also all the content that you're embedding, even to an extent linking to, although if you've got 100 links to 100 different sites, of course you can't guarantee that they're all accessible, but it's still worth letting them know that they might have issues. Now, copy-paste problems happen all the time. I've seen this a lot, actually, where the same descriptive text appears on different resources because we just copy and paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, and we don't change the accessibility label to update. But just check for that. I believe that is something that a tool can also help with. For one thing, Appium Automation commonly uses accessibility labels to disambiguate and find particular web elements, and Appium will freak out if you have the same label put on multiple elements, and that will be a good indicator for you that there's a problem there. And also, getting back to doing the right thing, if people hear the same description for multiple elements, how are they going to disambiguate between those things? So try to keep that in mind as well. Now, that was all 10. I blew through them. That's kind of amazing. I could probably talk for 10 minutes about each one, but that was the assignment I gave myself, was to talk about these 10 for you, because a lot of people have encountered these organically, but never really purposely gone through their own software, scouring for these different kinds of things. And you can understand then why, if you have a release in 3 days and your job is to make sure that something is accessible and you're trying to go for AA compliance, there's no way at T-3 days you can apply all 10 of these concepts to all of the pages that are under your purview for testing. It feels to me like it would probably be impossible, and at the very least, it would be tedious as heck. It would be very toil focused, and after a while, you would lose focus and not really start to catch everything. And the other problem is that if you do a release every 2 weeks and you have to spend 2 to 3 days on this every 2 weeks, you have no chance of catching all the regressions that are going to come through if you're doing it manually. So how do we automate? We believe 50%, that's a little bit conservative, of issues can be caught using automation of some sort. I'll tell you a couple of tools to look for. But basically about test automation, these are the things that we all know. Testing very well is difficult. Testing that looks for regression is tedious. Your eyes are gonna glaze over. You're not gonna be able to focus very well. You're gonna lose your concentration. This kind of testing requires high energy involvement and enthusiasm and things like that you can't really maintain for huge periods of time, especially if you have to do it very, very often. And then you think about how multiple platforms need to be covered, because if you make a site accessible in Chrome, there's a good chance it will automatically be accessible in Firefox and Edge and Safari, but it's not 100% guaranteed. And then you apply to things like mobile web browsers or mobile native applications, iOS, Android, screen readers on those things which are different. It becomes exceedingly difficult. So multiple platforms create this combinatorial explosion that makes comprehensive manual testing impossible. I don't usually like to make such absolute statements like that. I believe only Siths deal in absolutes, but this kind of testing becomes impossible. So automation can combine multiple checks into a single step and not miss any of them on repeat. This is what computers do. They're good at the toil part. What I find interesting about this whole chat GPT conversation and about the whole AI-driven test creation industry in general is that we are trying to automate the very hardest thing we can possibly automate first, which is, how do I replace the human in testing? And I think it's horribly misguided that that's our starting point for automation or for AI. AI should be helping us analyze what's already happened and then try to repeat those things to make sure that they don't happen again. Anyway, mini soapbox, I will get off of that. So complex business logic, API tests, all these kinds of things should be replicated constantly. That way you can test and commit all the time. So can your team actually check for accessibility regressions after every change? No. Different levels of training amongst products, developers, QA. Not everyone's going to find everything, and not everyone's an expert. Not everyone can be an expert. Everyone should know more, but not everyone can be an expert. So what do? We can't just test the happy paths. We have to look at how the UI renders the happy path, but then we need to check for error fields to have the right IDs. If you leave out the required phone number or last name field, does the error message have the ID and the label and the description text that it needs? Or is it just going to say, this field needs a value and the user has no idea which label it's attached to? It should say something like, required, first name is required, last name is required. It shouldn't just say, this field is required. So the next piece is screen readers themselves. I am a believer in testing the screen reader to an extent. I'm a believer in testing to make sure that the screen reader's keys that it uses to describe what's on the page are present. But keep in mind that Apple and Google created the screen reader, not your software developers. You are not testing the screen reader itself for bugs in the screen reader. You are testing to see if your application is implemented or instrumented, in order to be able to catch the screen reader in doing everything that it needs to be done. So you do need to make sure, I do believe that there's a lot of work to be done in listening to the output of the screen reader, but don't try to trick or test or fool the screen reader because you're trying to test it. And I have, not with screen readers, but I've definitely gone down these rabbit holes before where I'm like, I'm going to test to see if PayPal can take this. Like, well, my job isn't to test PayPal as an external API. Not my job. My job is to test my software's interaction with the external component. So limit your testing of screen readers, but still you need to do it. Now, one thing I need to talk about that I think you should Google is there is a prominent company out there, I will not mention the name, that does accessibility overlays to say, if your site isn't accessible, we're going to install this piece that makes it to where it's accessible. It's called an overlay. It is not a developer-driven, pre-instrumented way of making your site accessible. It is a way of taking a site that's not accessible and making it accessible. I'm going to put that in scare quotes. These tools are not very good. They open you up to liability because they advertise that they will make your site accessible, but they absolutely will not cover everything, and they will leave you open to liability. And the New York Times has done a very comprehensive, good report on this particular topic. Now, when you Google New York Times web accessibility overlays, the first link at the top of the page will be a sponsored link, and it will be a sponsored link to the company that you should not use. Read the article, get familiar with the concepts, and make sure that when you adopt a tool, that you actually adopt a tool that helps you verify, implement, do static analysis to make sure that accessibility is proper, but don't use overlay tools. They will open your company up to liability. I know you want to use them because it's pressing the easy button. And it's throwing money at something to make yourself sleep better at night to think that you have solved your problem. But the truth is, you might have opened yourself up to a much bigger problem. Multiple companies have been sued after using these technologies. So don't risk it. And in general, I try not to test services I don't control. This applies to screen readers. This says, if I'm linking out to Facebook, I don't need to make sure that Facebook is accessible. I don't need to test Akamai or Adobe Analytics. Those are not my purview. I need to test that my system interacts with them properly, but they are external calls to external systems, which means you need to take a very risk-based approach, not a coverage-based approach to testing them. Includes internal microservices. If another team has published a contract, you need to test to make sure your software works against that contract, and that contract is constantly being tested to make sure it's complied with by the service. But it's only your job to report issues with how your system interacts with that, and to make sure that the other teams are held accountable for how their services are working with yours. So that's all I got. I do want to say that there's a company out there called Evinced, E-V-I-N-C-E-D, Evinced, that does a really good job of mobile accessibility testing. And then DQ, as I mentioned before, they have good mobile accessibility testing tools, as well as tools for web testing. In fact, they are the originators of the Axe Core toolbox that you can use and weave it into your Selenium tests in order to do web testing to make sure that certain things are complied with. Roughly, they'll cover those top 10 issues and give you a warning sign. This is a problem. Contrast is an issue here. This is missing an accessibility label, and it'll sort of give you these early warning signs. It does not constitute an audit, but it will give you early warning signs to say, I have these problems. I'm going to fix these before I do my audit. That way, the audit won't catch the easy stuff. So anyway, those are the tools I have. I want to echo Sudip's point that Appium is underrated. I absolutely agree. Appium is actually kind of an amazing technology that it's got some downsides, got some upsides, but it's kind of amazing that it exists at all. Anyway, I can talk about all this stuff for hours, but please let me know if you have any questions. And thank you. I appreciate being here. I'm going to stop sharing now. Maybe Paul and I can get on at once and start talking about some stuff.
Yeah, cool. Marcus, thank you so much for that presentation. You covered a lot of things that are near and dear to my heart, which almost everything. No, I'm not going to say almost everything you said. I agree with you wholeheartedly. There is a company out there that does something that I don't want to say the name, but it's like copyright, but it's not copyright. There's another company, a very similar name with that I'm a little concerned about. That link, the one you said, Evinced, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you have that link? We could probably post that. Maybe we can.
Let me see. I'm trying to remember if it's .com or .io.
If you can throw it in the chat, I can throw it over to let's say from. I'm not sure why my messaging is not working this from LinkedIn, but I can throw it in from.
I'm able to do the private chat, but not in the public.
There we go. I'll throw it over there. So it will essentially end up in our chat over here, so everyone can take a look at that. So this should pop up in our chat, so you can see events over there. In 1 second, it should pop up. Seeing if it. Yeah, well, it did before. When I said there was like 15 minutes for questions. Not a lot of questions coming through over here. Like, so we'll chat. I did have one for you. If you mentioned on page 20, you had a link to what you were talking about on your item over there. So
yeah, the contrast checker.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just posted that.
And for some reason, I'm going to go. I'm wondering if links are getting kind of blocked over here from the YouTube channel. Maybe our guys on the back, maybe on the back end, they can grab those links and throw them into the chat. Let's see, link.
We could talk about the fallacy of 100% test coverage.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I actually, Mark, I think you know, the last 2 months I've been looking for a new job, and I did finally land one. I'm just gonna,
Congratulations.
Try and jinx it. Thank you. But one of the best parts of the interview was I was talking to the manager, and I said, how much automation are you looking for, and how are you looking to check those numbers? And he said, I'm looking for 80% And I'm like, great. And I I don't have to talk you off a ledge off of 100% automation, which is fantastic. The other thing you were saying earlier on was that you asked, well, can I define what that is? Generally, what I will do is I'll say, there's like 3 different ways we can look at this. It's the code coverage, requirements coverage, or test case coverage. I think that's the third. And try and encourage somebody to pick one. Don't try and go through all 3. But I don't know of anything at the moment that really shows code coverage in testing very much. Any tools? I'd ask you. Do you know of anything?
It's funny. I did this once in my career in 2010, and I haven't been able to replicate it since. But it's because it was an entirely Java everything, back end, front, everything was Java. And what we did was we instrumented the WAR file that represented the application. We instrumented that using a tool called Cobertura, which is, I don't even know if that's still around anymore. And then we ran our Selenium tests against the site while it was instrumented, and it would actually tell us a report. Here's what the Selenium tests covered, and here's what they didn't cover. But in the world of React and Vue and all the new JavaScript technologies, I kind of have no idea whether or not these things are done anymore. There is a company called C-Lights that attempts to give you information about test coverage at a code level. I have not used it, but I'm a big fan of the promise of it. SEALIGHTS. Actually, I think we're going to do a joint webinar with them soon, in fact.
Cool. I had a similar experience. It was actually on my first automation project working for a medical device manufacturer, and they instrumented their code and it slowed it down about 30%. And the great thing was that I'd already figured out at that point, even though it was like my first year in automation around 2001, that I needed to have my framework basically anticipate that the system's going to take some load and slow down. And then they came back and they said, you're covering about 60% of the code that's out there, but the more cool stuff is that we found a bunch of functions that aren't called anywhere. There's unreachable code, which is great for us. And then they ran away. I'm like, okay, cool.
Deleting code is one of the most satisfying things you can do. I spent the first 10 years of my career trying to write more and more code, and the last 10 years trying to delete it.
Oh man. So we covered Everett's. We covered that other link. Trying to think of what else. This is great on accessibility. It's just not a lot that we think about when we're thinking about how can people who are disabled have some sort of disability still have the ability to interact with our websites. About the biggest one that comes up to my mind that we were checking with a couple companies was being colorblind, and then you can't quite tell if you got red text on a green background; it looks all gray.
Yeah,
and for people who are colorblind on that.
Yeah, my company, Sauce Labs, is actually in the midst of changing our fundamental color palettes because of this issue. Because our primary color in the past has always been red, and it's just not a good color to use. So, yes. And also somebody pointed out that red is usually the color of test failure. So shouldn't we shy away from red?
Yeah, I've seen systems where it's like it's reporting something out in red, and it's like some sort of success or an info. I'm like, this is not a warning. It should not be in red. Pick a different color, gray, green, whatever. But I don't know. Tell me a little bit more about Sauce Labs. Tell everyone what does Sauce Labs do?
Well, we are trying to make everyone's life easier through test automation. We have an AI automation tool, but we don't really push it very much. Mostly we acquired it for like research purposes. But our main thing that we do right now is we help people to do automation at scale by providing mobile and web virtual machines that you don't have to futz with at all. So if you have a team of mobile engineers and you need an iPhone 7 because some person is still using an iPhone 7 and can't buy something, it's like, well, you could find one on eBay, like maybe someone will have one lying around. But at Sauce Labs, we got, a couple hundred. Still, hey, there you go.
Hey, that might be one right there.
It's funny. I've got somewhere on my desk here. I've got a 4. It doesn't work.
I'm a bit of a hoarder, as you can tell. I keep all my stuff. In fact, I got my one of the cups. I think this actually came from this conference because I was looking through the that conference from 2004 that we met at, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I spoke at every conference, but my name is not in that book anywhere. And I realized my company name at the time, Spherion, is actually in the book. So I'm like, oh yes, I was running the booth, and we're getting really excited here because I'm dropping stuff. So
that's cool. That mug is kind of a flex, I think.
And the Captain Mercury, yes, that's what I'm trying to do.
But so I mean, we have a device cloud of something like over 5,000 real devices. Wow. And so if you have a whole bunch of Espresso, XCUI, Appium tests, and you're having to plug in an iPhone or using a local emulator and run them serially, like send them over to us. We can, we'll run the same set of iOS tests on 8 different iPhones in parallel and have the results back in seconds, not 3 days or whatever it might normally take. And not only that, you don't have to. Usually what I find is that people, and I had this before in my previous job, there's a rack of phones and iPads, and you pull out the one you need and the battery's dead because someone forgot to plug it in. And so you plug it in, you wait 20 minutes, it boots up, it's on a two versions ago of the iOS. You have to update that. Then you have to install the app. You have to delete all the previous data from the previous instance. And so you're an hour into this before you even start to get testing on it. And it's like with our stuff, it's just you push a button and boom, device, upload your app, you're go. And it's just when I was in QA, the reason I came to Sauce Labs is 2 reasons. One, because when I was in QA, I really needed something like this. And I was a Sauce Labs customer, and I just thought, this just isn't good enough. I want to go there and make it better. So that's kind of what I'm here to try to do. My feeling is customers have run over 5 billion tests on our platform over the past 12 years, 5 billion. And we should be doing something with that data. And we're starting to put out statistics like for major financial customers, people who run tests that take on average less than 2 minutes have a much lower failure rate. Like we're able to take data from all these tests and correlate and collate and make sure that we can make statements like if you are running faster, more autonomous, more granular tests, you will have a better failure rate and you will be able to release to market faster. That kind of thing. I think it's super exciting.
Cool. And one of the things that to let our listeners know is that when you describe that, why would you want to go to all these different mobile devices and older versions of mobile devices? There's a term out there which is there's vertical testing and horizontal testing. Vertical testing is adding more tests to your test stack. Horizontal is going out onto all sorts of other mobile devices that are out there and trying to get those edge cases. As Marcus said, there's somebody out there who's still got an old iPhone, but we want to make sure it still works for them, which is a great way to find coverage on that. I think we're up at our time limit is 12 noon Chicago time over here. Marcus, again, I want to thank you very much for you joining us and giving us this presentation. It was great to see you again, and we have a chance to get maybe work together on some stuff in the near future.
Yeah, Selenium Conference in Chicago in March. Hope to see you there.
Hey, you got a date for that?
It's like the 23rd, I believe, but I could be right. It's the 20-something of March.
March 20-something. Hey, well, it's my hometown, so I will be there. I'll get out there and we can hang out. And also, I promise I will not run up to you and show you a picture of Will Roden and his kid and claiming it's you. You were very nice saying, yeah, you idiot, that's not me.
We look a little bit similar. I get it.
Like, your hair's straightened out a little bit. No, my gosh, that's not the same. Wait, funny. One question I do have before we go, 1 minute over. How that website with you and Will, how did you guys meet to come together and decided to put that thing together?
The 5-second story is that we worked at the same company and got to know each other using Mercury QTP, and we hated the product so much. We just were pushing every boundary it had, and decided that there were other people out there who needed to do the same thing. But the truth is, the moment WebDriver came out, within 48 hours, we made a decision to trash Mercury and go with Selenium WebDriver.
Yeah.
And we
by the way, everybody, there was the first time I saw a automation framework, it was two of them named. One was SIFL, SIFL, which you can see a little bit about that on the old on the website, which is only, like I said, only accessible through Internet Archive. And then there was another called Saffron. I think you guys were all talking about
right,
for a bit, which was just an amazing keyword-driven thing that was out there. I don't know how much you had on to do with Saffron, but you were promoting it.
Didn't work on it. Used it. It was good.
It was cool for UFT long before anybody knew what
right.
Selenium or WebDriver or anything like that was.
Yep.
All right. With that, we're 3 minutes over. I'm going to wrap that up again. Thank you very much, Marcus. Thank you, everybody, for coming and joining and watching the presentation over here. We will catch you next month, and then in February we're going to have Larry come back, and he's going to be hosting the events. Next month I have another friend of mine from another company that's going to come in, and you'll enjoy her presentation as well. With that, I'm going to say goodbye, good luck, stay safe, and have yourself happy holidays.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.